Lamb shows up in the Bible more than 200 times, not as metaphor as dinner, roasted over open flames, seasoned with bitter herbs, eaten standing up with sandals on, ready to move. That was the original Passover meal, and people still eat it exactly that way every single spring. But here is what nobody tells you. Almost everything in your grocery cart right now has roots in Scripture. Number 17 on this list was so valuable in the ancient world that it was used as currency, and you probably sprinkled it on your breakfast this morning. Number 7 was prescribed by God Himself as part of a ceremonial offering, and modern science just confirmed it fights inflammation better than most pills. These 25 foods survived empires, famines, and 4,000 years of history. Before we begin, subscribe because this list might change the way you look at your next meal. Let us count them down. Lentils might be the most underestimated food in the entire Bible. In Genesis 25, Esau sold his entire birthright to Jacob for a bowl of red lentil stew. His inheritance, his blessing, his future were all traded for a single pot of cooked legumes. That is how hungry he was, and that is how satisfying lentils must have been. In the ancient Near East, a handful of dried lentils cost almost nothing. Yet they provided enough protein and iron to sustain laborers through brutal desert heat. Farmers in Mesopotamia cultivated them as far back as 8000 BC, making lentils one of the oldest crops in human history. They stored for months without spoiling, cooked in under 30 minutes over a simple fire, and filled empty stomachs when meat was nowhere to be found. Today, lentils show up in kitchens from Mumbai to Minneapolis. Red lentil soup, green lentil salad, brown lentils simmered with garlic and cumin. The United Nations declared 2016 the International Year of Pulses, partly because lentils remain one of the most efficient sources of plant protein on Earth. The same humble food that bought a man's birthright still feeds millions. Yeah, most people eating them have no idea they're sitting down to a meal older than civilization itself. Number 24, grapes. Noah planted a vineyard as one of his first acts after the flood. Genesis 9 records it plainly. The man who survived the end of the world chose grapes. That tells you something about how essential this fruit was to ancient life. Grapes were eaten fresh, dried into raisins for long journeys, and pressed into wine, which became the most important drink in biblical culture. The spies Moses sent into Canaan came back carrying a single cluster of grapes so enormous. It took 2 men and a pole to carry it. Numbers 13 describes it as proof that the promised land was worth fighting for. A land flowing with milk and honey, yes, but also bursting with grapes the size of plums. Today, Americans consume over 8 lbs of grapes per person every year. Table grapes, wine grapes, grape juice, raisins, and grapeseed oil. The Napa Valley wine industry alone generates over $50 billion annually. From ancient terrace hillsides in Judea to modern supermarket produce aisles, the grape has never lost its place at the table. Number 23, cucumbers. When the Israelites wandered through the desert hungry and miserable, they did not cry out for steak or lobster. They cried for cucumbers. Numbers 11.5 records the complaint word for word. The people remembered the cucumbers they ate freely in Egypt, and the wilderness had none. That craving was real. Egyptian cucumbers grew along the Nile Delta, fat and crisp, cooled by river water in a land where temperatures could crack 110 degrees. They were hydration and food in one bite. Workers building the pyramids ate them daily. For the Israelites, trudging through the Sinai with nothing but manna, the memory of a cold cucumber must have been maddening. Today, cucumbers are the 4th most cultivated vegetable in the world. Sliced into salads, pickled in brine, blended into tzatziki. Americans alone eat over 10 billion pounds of cucumbers every year. That ancient craving never went away. Number 22, pomegranates. Pomegranates held sacred status in the ancient world. Exodus 28 describes them embroidered in blue, purple, and scarlet along the hem of the high priest's robe, alternating with golden bells. God Himself specified this design. The fruit was so revered that Solomon carved pomegranates into the pillars of his temple. Deuteronomy lists them among the 7 species that made the Promised Land special. Crack one open and you understand why. Hundreds of jewel-like seeds, each one bursting with tart sweetness, are packed inside a tough skin that could survive weeks of desert travel without spoiling. Modern research has caught up with ancient reverence. Pomegranate juice contains punicolagens, antioxidants so potent that studies show they outperform red wine and green tea. You can buy pomegranate seeds in plastic cups at gas stations now. The fruit that decorated priestly garments 3,500 years ago sits next to the energy drinks. Number 21, figs. The fig tree is the first plant identified by name in the Bible. In Genesis 3, Adam and Eve sewed fig leaves together after eating the forbidden fruit. But figs were far more than wardrobe material. In 1 Samuel 25, Abigail loaded 200 cakes of pressed figs onto donkeys as a peace offering to David. Dried fig cakes were ancient power bars, calorie-dense, portable, sweet enough to eat plain, and durable enough to last months without refrigeration. The sugar content acted as a natural preservative. A single dried fig packed about 50 calories and a pressed cake could sustain a soldier through a full day of marching. Jesus himself cursed a fig tree for bearing no fruit in Mark 11, a moment so dramatic it became one of the most debated passages in Scripture. Today, fresh figs command premium prices at farmers' markets. While fig Newtons remain one of the oldest continuously sold cookies in America, first produced in 1891, the fig never left. Number 20, garlic. Garlic appears in that same desperate complaint in Numbers 11 alongside cucumbers. The Israelites missed the garlic of Egypt, and they had reason to. Egyptian laborers received daily garlic rations. Historians believe the builders of the Great Pyramid consumed enormous quantities to maintain their strength and to ward off disease. Ancient Egyptians placed garlic bulbs in tombs as offerings for the afterlife. It was that important. The sulfur compounds in garlic, particularly allicin, have been confirmed by modern research to lower blood pressure, reduce cholesterol, and fight bacterial infections. A food that ancient workers depended on for survival turns out to be one of the most medically validated ingredients on the planet. Americans now consume over 2.5 lobes of garlic per person per year, and the global garlic market exceeds $30 billion. Every Italian grandmother and every biblical laborer understood the same truth. Garlic makes everything better and keeps you standing. Onions right there with garlic and cucumbers in Numbers 11. Onions completed the holy trinity of Egyptian foods the Israelites mourned in the wilderness. Onions were so central to Egyptian life that workers were sometimes paid in them. The layers of the onion symbolized eternity to the Egyptians, and they placed them in the eye sockets of mummified pharaohs. For the Israelites, onions meant flavor. In a world where most food was bland and monotonous, raw, roasted in coals, or chopped into stews, onions transformed anything they touched. Today, onions are the most widely cultivated vegetable on earth. Grown in at least 175 countries, Americans eat roughly 20 lbs per person every year. The food that made desert wanderers weep with longing still makes us weep every time we chop one. Number 18, olives and olive oil. Olive oil runs through the Bible like a river. It anointed kings, fueled lamps, healed wounds, and enriched bread. Deuteronomy 8:8 names the olive tree as one of the glories of the Promised Land. When the dove returned to Noah's ark, it carried an olive branch, and that image of peace has endured for millennia. Olive trees live for centuries, some over 1,000 years. Trees in the Garden of Gethsemane are estimated to be 900 years old. Where Jesus prayed the night before his crucifixion, their root systems may go back even further. A single mature tree could produce 50 lbs of olives per season, yielding enough oil to light a home and serve as medicine. Today, the global olive oil industry generates over $15 billion annually. The Mediterranean diet is considered one of the healthiest in the world. Cardiologists prescribe it. Ancient priests poured it over altars. Number 17, salt. Jesus called his followers the salt of the earth in Matthew 5:13. That was not poetry. That was economics. In the ancient world, salt was currency. Roman soldiers received salarium, a salt allowance. That is where the word salary comes from. Leviticus 21:13 commanded that every grain offering be seasoned with salt, not optional, required. The covenant of salt represented an unbreakable agreement because salt preserved things. It stopped decay. It kept food from rotting in a world without refrigeration. A handful of salt could mean the difference between eating or starving. The Dead Sea, sitting at the lowest point on Earth, contains roughly 34% salt. Today, the average American consumes 3,400 megauss of sodium daily. Salt remains the most used seasoning on the planet. The substance God demanded on his altar still sits on every table. Next, leeks complete the list of Egyptian foods. These mild, sweet alliums grew abundantly along the Nile and became a staple of the Egyptian diet. Cheaper than onions and more versatile than garlic, leeks could be eaten raw, braised, or thrown into soups. Egyptian priests reportedly avoided leeks because their strong flavor was considered inappropriate before temple service. Today, leeks anchor French cooking and countless soups. Potato leek soup remains a popular comfort food. Most people have no idea they are cooking with a vegetable that made slaves homesick. Number 15, almonds. Aaron's rod budded, blossomed, and produced almonds overnight in Numbers chapter 17, proving God's priesthood. The almond tree was the first to bloom each spring in Israel, earning it the Hebrew name meaning the wakeful tree. The menorah described in Exodus 25 was designed with cups shaped like almond blossoms on every branch. Today, California produces 80% of the world's almonds. Almond milk sales exceed $1.5 billion in the U.S. alone. A nut that signaled God's authority now sits in lattes. Number 14, honey. The Promised Land was described as flowing with milk and honey, a phrase repeated over 20 times in Scripture. Jonathan dipped his staff into a honeycomb in the forest in 1 Samuel, and his eyes brightened immediately.